All right, so here it is, Lasmus versus IWinAgain, and it looks like it's going to be the mono red versus the mono yellow. Match of the ages right here.
So this matchup ends up being kind of interesting because both players will really just do their own thing, both trying to get as aggressive towards the orb as quick as possible. And it really depends on the draws because red does have a little bit of removal to take away from the yellow haste creatures, and they're also going to hit harder than the yellow is. But at some point, it could come down to either a big Firebringer versus a big Crusader that really ends up swinging the game for one player or the other.
Yeah, I think realistically the Crusader's just about always going to be bigger here. So I think it's really up to red to kind of take over the early game, possibly even kind of control the yellow deck a little bit, make sure it doesn't get into the face and start activating those Column's Prayers. If IWinAgain can do that, I think he's going to be at a major advantage in this matchup.
I think also really nice for IWinAgain that he's able to get this aggressive this early because he's actually going to be able to contest a Doomdrake if Lasmus had one in hand. Now we can see that he doesn't, but even just going first when you're able to put this much pressure on one turn away from your opponent's orb way earlier than they're able to set up, you're way ahead in the race, at least 2 turns from the way the current setup is going.
Yeah, and we see Lasmus using this really slow start again, just the one desert, likely into double prayer on the following turn. But against another rush deck like this, it's really not that beneficial to be doing this sort of thing. And in my opinion, if you do that, you really have to play the Explorer on the first turn, just to prevent your opponent from getting in a prairie this far, as we see IWinAgain did right here.
Yeah, and Lasmus very inefficiently here. It looks like he's going to use the haste available from Monk and Wind Soldier, possibly, just to clear off this King's Faithful, because he realizes how far behind he would be if he allows it to live and continue to push that orb damage.
Man, but that's just such a bad trade for him. He's already off just on a very bad start here. It's 6 Faeria and 2 cards for 5 Faeria and 1 card. It's just an absolutely massive swing in favor of the red deck here. So I think
Yeah.
IWinAgain is probably going to look to ride this on and just see if he can use it to take over the match.
Yeah, sometimes a play like that isn't too bad because, again, those haste creatures could grab an extra Faeria off a well if they're in the right position, but in that spot, it's just absolutely very detrimental to what you want to be doing as a yellow rush player to be playing in that way. And IWinAgain, we actually see go for the mountain on each side instead of pushing his mountains up one side to get in the right position for the axe grinder, trying to stop the yellow rush player from getting as aggressive as possible. And we see Lasmus again using those monks to kill off anything that IWinAgain plays.
Yeah, and IWinAgain doesn't have much of a board left. We can see the Lasmus has a little bit of an advantage in that regard. But at this point, he's pretty much out of gas. He has a Column's Prayer and nothing else in hand whatsoever. So he's going to be really relying on the top of his deck to deliver what he needs and not just draw little things like Kalium's Followers at this point.
Yeah, IWinAgain does have the ability here to either play the axe grinder or to +1 Faeria and get like something like the fire elemental down. Both of those would just die off to this Origin Templar, but it really is what he values more of the way that he wants to block his opponent's lands. Because right now he looks like he's really focusing on hemming in the lands of the Yellow Rush player and not allowing him to get that aggressive desert down.
Yeah, and I think on that note, I like developing on the right side, because developing on the left side, that doesn't really do as much to your opponent. The Templar can still come in and trade, but this also does deny the one Faeria from Lasmus, so Lasmus wouldn't be able to collect on the right side and then trade into the creature on the right side mountain. So it does have benefits to doing this as well, but it still allows Lasmus the opportunity of pushing forward and starting to make his own aggressive lands.
Yeah, very, very strong play there. Just in the positioning of the axe grinder versus on the right, like you mentioned. But again, Lasmus with nothing really in hand, even if he chooses to trade this Templar into the axe grinder, he has nothing to follow it up with, either to develop as a Faeria gatherer or to push up some aggression. So I would generally expect in this position he'll just move the Templar off to the right, collect off that well, and start pushing some lands up. But right now it's looking in a very awkward position for him, really needing something like a Wind Soldier on the following turn to get a little bit back into the game.
Yeah, just from what we can see in IWinAgain's hand, if Lasmus does choose to make a more passive play like that, I think it's just going to snowball out of control really quickly for IWinAgain. We see the Shed Pest in hand, and if he is able to get that down and active, then he's in a very good spot because the yellow deck doesn't have any really good way of dealing with that.
Yeah, and we actually do see him go for the trade there. Very likely we'll see the Fire Elemental come down just because it represents a bigger, little bit of a bigger body than the Shed and Pest, and the Firebringer potentially could be later on in the game. Although that Firebringer is big enough right now that if you went Mountain directly in front of Lasmus's Orb, just that one space away, it could be very difficult for Lasmus to deal with.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how IWinAgain's hand, like even though he has these advantages we've been talking about, he's just still in a really weird spot because Lasmus's removal is lining up really well against his creatures right now. So this is an opportunity for Lasmus really to come back, and he's taking the time to develop his lands and everything as this is going as well.
Yeah, it ends up kind of stemming back to the way that the first Fire Elemental mountain developed by IWinAgain onto the left side instead of directly onto the well on the right side, because that actually would have allowed the Axe Grinder that was played on the previous turn to be that one extra life, which meant the Templar wouldn't have been able to kill it, and he could have snowballed it that way as well. But now we actually see Lasmus stabilize because he got not only just a creature that'll stick on the board, but a great one in terms of the pressure that Kaleem provides.
Yeah, it does apply a lot of pressure, and we've seen the mobility that Kalim has too. But this Firebringer is going to be just enough to be able to contest this Kalim, and Kalim won't even be able to get out of the way of it this turn. So this is a great answer to the Kalim threat that we see here.
I believe this Firebringer it's at least right at 6/6, maybe a 7/7. I can't remember if that was in his hand from the beginning of the game or if it was drawn into on one of the first couple turns there.
I believe it is a 6/6, but I'm not positive, and I don't think there's anything Lasmus can really draw to get him out of the situation either. Obviously, something like a Flash Wind might be possible, but I'm not sure if Lasmus is running those in his list or not.
Oh, interesting play there. So he actually goes for the double prairie to block off any of the mountain spots. Very interesting that he played onto the left one because the Firebringer right now would either move to the right and kill off Kaleem, or it would move aggressive and hit the orb. I don't think that left movement and then place a mountain for the Axe Grinder spot is ever something that you really consider as the situation that Red is in right now.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Maybe a little bit of a wasted turn for Lasmus, or at least wasted prairie drop. He could have developed more desert, so he has him for the last nightmare, or possibly even started drawing cards at this point. I don't know if you really mind so much if Red starts getting that aggressive land in there. At this point, you really need to get your own aggression going, otherwise they're just going to snowball out of control anyway.
Yeah, I really like taking the trade here by IWinAgain, killing off Kaleem, not only to deny that fairy gathering from Kaleem, but instead of pushing the orb damage, Firebringer in that trade reduces its life to a point where Shed and Pest would become a 6/4 if he chooses to go for the +1 play here.
And it looks like that is what he's doing. We see the Shed and Pest come down right here. And that foregoes the aggressive mountain, but I really don't think IWinAgain cares too much about that right now.
Doomsday is a very interesting pickup here from Lasmus. Would be able to stop this aggression, kind of reset the board a little bit. As soon as the second one comes up, that's exactly what he has to go for. But just awkward draws here from Lasmus in the monks that he's already used early, meaning he can't get cycling through his deck just off of pushing orb damage from his opponent right now.
Yeah, and this puts Lasmus in a really bad spot. This hate seed is going to come down for free at some point here. The Fire Elemental represents a lot of damage as well. Looks like the Fire Elemental will be the creature of choice here.
I believe the Fire Elemental, yeah, does make the Hate Seed free, just because I was trying to gauge what the discount on the Hate Seed was based on the life of, or the attack and life of the Firebringer, and I was pretty sure it was a free card there, so very close to lethal over the upcoming turns for IWinAgain here.
Yeah, we see a Zealous Crusader in hand right now, but that's going to be a very bad Crusader. It's a 2/2 charge for a 2 right now.
It doesn't represent doing anything here. Second Doomsday will be played.
Now, that's actually a little bit better than the first one, because IWinAgain doesn't have any good threats to follow this up on. He doesn't want to run out this Bomb Slinger. Oh, but there's the Hate Seed. That's going to be a great play here.
And the draw into the Outland Ranger is just like even better to get another creature. If he had drawn into any of his 4-cost creatures, actually wouldn't have been able to play them. But Outland Ranger just being another creature onto the board represents so much, as well as the Campfire onto the Hate Seed actually representing lethal here. So that looks like I don't believe there will be a way that Lasmus can recover, possibly Soul Drain onto the Outland Ranger if he's able to top deck one there, but just concedes the game.
Yep, that'll do it. So IWinAgain will take round 1 of this best of 5.
So we'll see if Lasmus goes to that green-yellow sack like he did in the previous series there, or if he will bring out whatever his other deck is.
Yeah, I can't imagine that he'd choose a different counter this time around. Well, at the same time, if you were trying to counter this mono red deck, what exactly are you picking nowadays? I think mono green might be your best choice, but other than that, I'm not sure what else would exist that would be a great matchup for it.
Yeah, I believe mono green is a really good one. Just because of the way that red wants to position their lands, sometimes you can get a really good slam off because they don't have a lot of options in where to place creatures. Or once you are able to stabilize just one big creature onto the board, it's very difficult for red to efficiently deal with it. But sometimes we do see red, draw the right way, and they're able to push those big attack creatures just bully around the green in efficient ways when everything costs 4 for red versus some of the bigger costs for green. So does look like Lasmus has chosen his sacrifice deck here.
So this sacrifice matchup is a really, really interesting one for red. I think if the green yellow sacrifice deck has a lot of very powerful plays it can do, getting down demon wings and all sorts of things early on. But if it stumbles at all, this red deck really punishes it hard. So it's really kind of draw dependent. I think it's kind of the green yellow deck's option to either win or lose depending on their draw.
Yeah, and sometimes you can get some very good clears early. Something like a Demon Wrangler can represent a very good clear onto like a Fire Elemental, just because it has that 2 life, and that can allow you to snowball your Bone Collector, and that really allows you to snowball the game. But like you said, it sometimes is very draw dependent. So we will have to see. I really I was going to say, I really don't like this play from IWinAgain playing the Fire Elemental so far back, but with that Horsemaster in hand, it's actually not a bad one.
See, I'm still not exactly partial to it, just because it can't reach the Bone Collector this turn. I probably would have waited one more turn on this Fire Elemental just because you don't really want to run forward and hit the face for 5 at this point.
Possibly he just steps it up one space, double neutrals, maybe off to the right side to try to get his mountain in the right position, and then that sets up the Horsemaster for the following turn. And Lasmus actually reads the Horsemaster play and places his Village Elder right in front. As much as this does deny the 5 damage to the orb, this actually gives IWinAgain a different alley where he can play a neutral off to the side and get the Horsemaster in an even more aggressive position. Whereas before, that Horsemaster would have had to come down right in front of his own orb, so the Fire Elemental had a full range to the orb there. So very interesting from Lasmus that he actually kind of gave his opponent an odd positioning just because of the way he played it.
Yeah, really not a fan of how that turned out. I mean, the 5 orb damage can seem like it hurts a lot. I mean, that's a quarter of your health, right? But I think he might have just played that a little bit too quickly before thinking about, what he knows he's playing around Horsemaster, but he could have forced his opponent to play the Horsemaster in a much worse spot.
Yeah, Lasmus does pick up the second Bone Collector, which is very nice here to contest the Horsemaster. But again, just an awkward way that it ended up. IWinAgain going to be able to get his mountain in on the right side well for the Axe Grinder buff if that's the one he chooses to go for. But his only value trade right now would be killing off the Bloom Sprite, and that continues to give pressure to the Bone Collector. So we actually see him go for the Shed and Pest in the middle instead. Very slow play here from IWinAgain.
Yeah, it's very slow, but I think I really like it. This allows him to make sure he doesn't give away any free value on this Horsemaster getting traded into by the Bone Collector. But it still allows him to develop the board and really start pushing on the green-yellow deck, making sure they don't have space to really get anything going.
Yeah, and Lasmus with a couple of Last Nightmares in hand, really not what you want to see at this point. Especially when you have no deserts on board right now, something that eventually can maybe catch you up into the game if you're ahead and really close it out for you, but just nothing to play unfortunately right now.
Yeah, and something like a Silent Horsemaster draw or something like that for IWinAgain really just does a number on Lasmus at this point. If he's able to use that Horsemaster to get in and go after the Bone Collector.
Bone Collector is in enough of a protected spot. The Bloom Sprite is going to die at some point to buff the Bone Collector even more, but unless Lasmus can find something else right now, this Shed and Pest is still going to be able to kill off the Bone Collector just whenever it happens. And a second Shed and Pest now, if that's what IWinAgain chooses to go for, will really be difficult to deal with. Just a lot of power right now.
Yep, absolutely. And I really like the way that he traded off into this. I know I was looking at the Horsemaster trading into the Bloom Sprite at first, but it kind of would have ended up the same either way. But with this, if no matter what the Bone Collector trades into, a Flame Burst is still a good draw to be able to finish it off.
Yeah, very nice there. Lasmus picking up a Soulbound Sagami off the Bloom Sprite. Not a bad one to use as a sacrifice target because it gives something 3/5. Elderwood Hermit as well. The last words on it can be very strong onto a multitude of creatures that you're going to draw into, but unfortunately doesn't have anything that is a sacrifice card right now. Just a few targets in hand. Looks like he's going to have the Annoying Gnat come down. And this Annoying Gnat, if it continues to spawn in spots where IWinAgain can get some good value trades onto it, could represent a lot of damage over time here.
Yep, and actually just dropping down that Sagami, 3/5 for 3 with that sort of ability on it has a lot of potential. And with this Nat, we know for sure that it's going to hit on a creature at some point.
So IWinAgain right now in a position where the 6/3 could kill the Gnat, and you can push 8 damage to the orb right now. Play the King's Faithful, and then I believe play the Hate Seed as well, even if it requires an extra +1 Faeria. But if that Gnat respawns on the spot that it currently is on, it ends up being an absolutely awful situation for you, where you only get 4 damage and you get cleared very efficiently. Don't get a lot of pressure onto the board, so is a little bit of a risk doing it that way. And we do see IWinAgain actually just clear off the Bone Collector here.
Yeah, I think that Nat plays a low enough percentage scenario that they didn't even really consider it. But I do think that that Bone Collector had a lot of problems going on with it, and I think it's really worthwhile to be able to trade off into that before worrying about anything else on the board.
So going for the Axe Grinder instead of the King's Faithful there, very interesting to see it play out in that way. I guess just keeping the King's Faithful until there are some bigger creatures on board instead of where like the Elderwood Hermit possibly is a creature that very efficiently pops the protection bubble and then you're able to kill it with something else here. But Lasmus is still in a world of trouble here.
Sort of. He's actually not doing too badly now. He has the option of either coming back and trading or going for face, and I think the trade is definitely the correct choice. But he's contesting both the creatures on the board pretty nicely. But he's going to take some damage before he's actually able to make that trade, unless he starts dropping things like Village Elder in the way of the Axe Grinder, which I probably do expect to see here at this point.
Would have been very interesting to see if he had just gone for the race there. Because of the position that the Annoying Gnat was in, Elderwood Hermit attacking into the Hate Seed would have buffed the Gnat up to 7. Could have put a 3-turn clock on IWinAgain, but I don't think it's quite enough. So yeah, I really like going for that trade as well in that position.
So I think the Bomb Slinger coming down on the Nat this turn is probably a decent. But the problem is the Elderwood Hermit trades into that pretty effectively. So it looks like he's going to go for the King's Faithful instead, which also trades very nicely into the Nat.
Yeah, just continuing to put as much pressure, again, into that top right corner as possible. Lasmus did move his lands out in a position where it looks like he's going to attempt to get double collection on the left side there. Demon Wrangler actually a really good pickup here. Is there? I don't believe there's a way you can get to the Yak attack, which would be very nice at this point, but...
Yeah, I don't see one, unfortunately. He only has the one more fairy at his disposal. And man, he's just in a really tough spot at this point. He almost wants to save up for this Yak attack, which would mean that this turn is probably the Demon Wrangler on the Elderwood Hermit after moving the Hermit back in some. But it's really tempting to just go ahead and play the Last Nightmare on the King's Faithful instead, just to deal with that creature that's almost always a 2-for-1 against this deck.
Yeah, I actually really like the Last Nightmare in this situation. You lose 1 Faeria of value, 6 Faeria Last Nightmare versus a 5 Faeria creature, but I think it's 100% worth it. Not only to deny the orb damage that you might take from King's Faithful, but to also deny the amount of value that it could get just in other creature trades. So kind of unfortunate, I think, that the Demon Wing got the buff there, although that will be a very strong creature for Lasmus. But if it had gone onto the Demon Wrangler, it would be very good to contest the Axe Grinder here.
Okay, we do see the Last Nightmare coming down, so this opens up the opportunity for the Bomb Slinger to come down and just hit the face for 5 with the Axe Grinder. I think it's pretty likely that's the play we're going to see.
Yeah, definitely. Both of those creatures should be in pretty much uncontested spots over the next turn as well. Lasmus does go for the aggression with the Gnat, which I really like as well in this spot.
Yeah, I think he'll even be able to play the Hate Seed after dropping this Bomb Slinger too.
I believe even the last one that he played was free as well. So yeah, definitely going to be able to put that down on the spot the Axe Grinder is currently occupying.
Yep, and that'll do it. The free Hate Seed coming down, and there's a lot of pressure on the side of the board. It's not quite threatening lethal, just because of the placement of these creatures, but at the same time, Lasmus doesn't really have anything he can do to contest this many creatures on the board.
Yeah, unfortunately, even the +1 from the Faeria wheel won't get him to enough for a last nightmare here. Um, so IWinAgain has probably an Outland Ranger for a campfire for lethal, possibly something like a Flame Burst. But even without those, he has so many creatures over here that it's going to take a few turns before Lasmus can even contest them. That it looks like they're going to be able to close the game out over the upcoming turns anyway.
Yep, absolutely. Now the 7/6 does give some problems, but at this point, it looks like a few creatures are going to trade into the face, hit down to 9, and then this Nat can't even die. It's just a straight up liability, even if all the creatures are able to be dealt with.
Yeah, that's very true too. The Nat, if you get early enough in the game, can be a very good sacrifice target just because it always exists on the board. But in this situation, it's just not going to be enough. Even if now with that Firebringer draw, even if Lasmus was somehow able to clean all of this up, that Firebringer just is going to be absolutely massive.
Yep, and we see him try to draw the lethal in Flame Burst or Bomb Slinger or Cypher's Wrath, but not able to find any of those. Um, so instead, just going to hit his opponent down to 1 and probably develop the King's Faithful, just one more durable threat on the board.
Yeah, I like the King's Faithful there just because the protection does have that extra bit of durability. Even the Firebringer right now is probably somewhere over a 10-10, but still the protection on the King's Faithful is just so impactful.
Yeah, I'd actually be tempted to develop the King's Faithful back by the Annoying Net instead, just to have that extra diversity and be able to trade into it just in case you need to.
Yeah, that would actually be a really good play as well. You look so secure on the three creatures that you have up by your opponent's orb right now, in just your opponent not being able to kill them off, that the King's Faithful actually does look really good to come down defensively, kill the Nat, if by some way your opponent is able to kill all of those. So I actually really like that play.
Yep. Instead, he's going to choose to go for the Firebringer, though, and I think that plays around just about everything you'd be worried about anyway. I think the biggest issue would be possibly Bloom Sprite into Wild Avenger, but the Firebringer's going to be big enough that that's not a threat anyway.
Even still, Wild Avenger in this matchup isn't as threatening as it would be in something like a Yellow Rush, where they've been hitting you for 2 damage over time. This has been the Axe Grinder hit, I think, 3 times, something like that, where you've only been hit maybe 4 times, so the Wild Avenger doesn't get quite to the same amount. But Demon Wrangler, sacrifice off the Nat for the kill yourself.
And he does.
Yeah, very nice.
Some style points with the suicide there, but IWinAgain taking game 2 and bring this matchup to a 2-0. So Lasmus needs to rely on his last deck here, and I don't even know if we know what the last deck is, to see if he can take the rest of this match in a reverse sweep.
Yeah, so we'll have to see if it is going to be a mirror match in both players playing red, or if Lasmus has brought some version of blue as his final list there. But it's always very disheartening when you have the opportunity to counter and then lose that counter deck, that now you have to play what you initially would have believed to be possibly the worst of the matchups. But we will have to see what that is out of Lasmus.
It's possible it's a mono green deck still too, and it is. Okay. So even though we saw the green-yellow sack here, it looks like Lasmus is only playing green and yellow in his decks here.
Yeah, again, as I think Aqua mentioned in a couple of our earlier games, the green-yellow sack doesn't take a lot of tools from this green list. So, yeah, Lasmus is able to still put one of those together. And that green, like I kind of mentioned, if it's able to get established and get some of those trades and get set up before the red player is really able to get into the positions that it wants, it can take games off of this red player. But if red is able to get set up first, which it looks like IWinAgain with that Fire Elemental into possibly the Axe Grinder in the right position, he's going to be looking to be in a very good spot here.
Yeah, definitely a very strong start. Anytime you have a Fire Elemental and you're not facing down a Wood Elemental, you just get started so much quicker than your opponent. We can see right here, just the Living Will is the only option here, and that doesn't even contest the board that well.
We actually may see IWinAgain just go for the Bomb Slinger here to completely clear off. Although it is an inefficient clear, it is a possibility to go for here from IWinAgain.
Yeah, I think if I knew my opponent wasn't playing Falcon Dives, I would almost certainly do that. But if there's any unknown whatsoever, I'd probably just go for the Axe Grinder without the hit. But we do see the Bomb Slinger is going to come down right here.
Yeah, and very nicely gets the Bomb Slinger in onto the well positioning. So both of these creatures right now strong enough to take out a lot of the pressure of whatever Lasmus plays. If it ends up being that Grove Guardian, the combination of both of them will be able to take that out and refill with the Axe Grinder or the Fire Elemental right in behind it.
Absolutely. And it looks like Lasmus is planning on taking the spot by the well, the aggressive spot, which is a pretty good move by him. That way you can't develop the Axe Grinder just so it can immediately hit the face the next turn.
This does allow IWinAgain to push some lands up the opposite side and get the Axe Grinder developed into that position on a following turn. But yeah, I do like taking that one just because then when your opponent does play an Axe Grinder onto the right side here, it's denied in how quickly it can get to your orb.
Yeah. And this actually puts IWinAgain in an interesting spot here. He could develop the Shedim Pest or the Axe Grinder, but neither of those really contest something like a Verdurd Force or Feral Kodama too well. And we can see in Lasmus's hand, he does have this Feral Kodama, so that could be the opportunity that Lasmus needs to take over the game.
Yeah, and we actually see, just because of the way it's played out now, that Bomb Slinger did look very good into the Living Willow, like we mentioned when he made the play, but that was a very take the game now play. Now Lasmus having the ability to play this Feral Kodama, which would be very easily contested by a creature and the Bomb Slinger as a follow-up. So just the way it's played out, a little bit punishing in the way that IWinAgain played for the immediate instead of the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And anytime you use Bomb Slinger on the one power creature, it feels a little bit odd just because, you're not really losing that much by hitting with the creature another time.
I really like this positioning of the Feral Kodama as well. Playing away from the Shedim Pest would require a few resources in order to kill the Kodama, and it also doesn't threaten any orb damage immediately this turn. So very nicely played the Kodama away so Lasmus can take the trades that he wants on the following turn.
Yeah, the only thing I don't like about this is it doesn't have any opportunity for the Huntmaster to teleport at this turn. In addition, it doesn't collect this turn. So because of that, even though it is a little bit closer to the Shed and Pest, I would have considered developing it on the square just above the Shed and Pest, because it has both Huntmaster opportunities and the ability to collect the following turn.
Yeah, that could have been an option as well. So we'll have to see how it plays out if it is a spot that gets a little punished there, not having that one extra Faeria on the following turn for something like a Hunt Master and then feed the forest or anything along those lines. But IWinAgain looking like he's going to develop that mountain spot, get the Axe Grinder down, which I
Oh, it's going to be the Horsemaster.
oh Horsemaster in, yeah, because then you can get the 6 damage to the orb here.
Yep, absolutely. And this trades very nicely into the Feral Kodama with the two creatures. You have, your one that's a decent size and one that's a little bit smaller. Still be able to collect next turn if he chooses to take out the 3/2 instead. This actually puts IWinAgain in a very good position. So I really like the way that he played with this Horsemaster.
Yeah, and that play actually requires Lasmus just like he did to take out the Shedim Pest first, meaning the Horsemaster survives and allows a King's Faithful to come down on this turn, which will be a very difficult creature for Lasmus to. Oh, he actually goes for the Axe Grinder instead. Wonder if he'll go
looks
for
like he's going to do Axe Grinder
the
Hate Seed. Mm-hmm.
King's Faithful with the protection
from both sides.
Yeah, that's very nice. I was going to say the King's Faithful is a difficult one for the green to deal with just because of that protection, but this spreading the creatures out in the way that IWinAgain has done is actually a little awkward for Lasmus to deal with. Does have the Therian Golem into feed, possibly can go for a Therian Golem into feed a second time, and if he picks up something else to go with this Feral Kodama that he just picked up, could be very difficult.
Yep, doesn't even need the second feed. He just takes the Faeria Wheel instead, and this is a massive turn for the green deck. I think with this matchup, whoever starts playing two cards in the same turn, it just heavily favors them. And Lasmus just played a 5/10 and a 7/7 slam in the same turn. It's absolutely a massive turn for him, and I don't see a good way for IWinAgain to come back from this. He really needs to start drawing his Firebringers and having his own large creatures that can test the board.
Yeah, one of the kind of awkward things right now is as soon as that Feral Kodama comes down, because it has the slam, IWinAgain does have a lot of options. He could play a big Shedim Pest, he could play the Hate Seed, or he could play the King's Faithful since it has the protection and the Hate Seed along with that. But because of that slam, he needs to play them in such awkward spots to deny that slam value that he's only going to be able to play one of them this turn. And just like that, he only plays the Shedim Pest here.
Yeah, and that's not too bad for him. He's in a position where the green deck isn't even farming that much Faeria. We'll see one come down from the Feral Kodama this turn, but other than that, he's not really getting that far ahead, or rather, IWinAgain is not getting that far behind by just, taking a little bit of time away from this.
So the Grove Guardian is going to come down here from Lasmus. Still dies off to the Shedim Pest, but it does protect the Therian Golem here. and does actually play around any sort of Huntmaster to move over and kill the Kodama. A Cypher's Wrath is a fantastic draw here to kill off that Kodama on the left, though.
Yep, absolutely massive play. He's going to be able to follow this up with a free hate seed if he wants to. Probably with a King's Faithful to support it. So he can play both those creatures on the left side and potentially threaten lethal, even though it's fairly easy for Lasmus just to kind of walk in the way of it.
And we should see the King's Faithful come down directly beside the orb to play around any sort of Huntmaster, moving the Therian Golem into a position to body block, and that's exactly what he goes for there. Now with that Grove Guardian picked up, Lasmus could move the Therian Golem and then possibly gain the Faeria from the action wheel and play that, but seems still in a very awkward position here.
Yep, absolutely. And this 5/6, even if he moves it up, I don't know if he can really attack the 4/1 at all. If he does so, then he almost needs to feed the forest on the 5/2, but that doesn't even really make sense at this point. So I think he has to move his Therian Golem over there and just end his turn. I think that's really the only play that Lasmus has.
Yeah, there's not really a good way to Huntmaster either, I don't believe. Forest Huntmaster. No, okay. So you can move the Therian
Okay.
Golem to the well, and then Huntmaster. You'd have to create a forest on the other side, just below the Hate Seed. Huntmaster your Therian Golem over there, and you could kill the 4/4.
Okay, yeah, I was looking at that line a little bit differently. If he had played the Huntmaster first before collecting, he could have teleported it up to the prairie on his side instead, and gone in to attack the 4/4. But
Gets
here
the
we see a
Elder Wood.
Grove
Yeah,
Guardian.
this is good. The Elderwood
Yeah,
Embrace makes this a fantastic play. Grove Guardian would be very difficult to deal with. Possibly a position where IWinAgain actually doesn't do anything here. Maybe moves the Hate Seed in, but actually goes for the X-Runner on the other side, which is just as reasonable. But you don't want to attack in here and give your opponent a good Falcon Dive. You'd rather them do it on their turn, and then you can react to it. So I like probably not attacking here.
it depends a little bit on how much they've been watching the stream. Does Lasmus even have Falcon Dives in his list?
Well, I don't believe we would have even seen this deck on stream so far.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. Um, so here we just see the 7/10, and you were talking about the Axe Grinder play. I definitely do like it. We've talked about it before, just kind of spreading out these threats. Ooh, and the way that this creature moved over, this Bomb Slinger is going to be able to make very short work of it.
Yeah, this is going to be fantastic clear here. Flameburst picked up as well. Does that allow... I guess not quite enough area to Bomb Slinger and Flameburst, the Grove Guardian, so you can push that 4 damage to the orb, but there is the Firebringer that you were talking about.
Yeah, this thing is probably about a 9/9 right now, I would guess. It might be a little bit bigger than that, though.
Yeah, we have seen the Hate Seed be a free creature for a little while now. Not sure exactly how many creatures IWinAgain has played since, but I would expect it to be somewhere in around the 10/10 amount of value, especially now playing that Bomb Slinger this turn.
Yep, and it looks like this could very easily be lethal on the following turn with this Flame Burst in hand. We see the Therian Golem move away, the Wood Elemental is going to come down to be able to taunt up one of these creatures, but the 3 damage in hand looks like it's going to do it.
Yeah, a second Flame Burst picked up as well. Even more Burst for IWinAgain, but trading one of these creatures, the Bomb Slinger and the Flame Burst, will be enough. Beautifully played game there again by IWinAgain.
Yeah, beautiful match there, really. That's it. That means that IWinAgain will take the 3rd place and be awarded a Razor mousepad. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Razor Goliathus mousepad will go to him, as well as the Discord t-shirt, and I'm sure Scream will try to fit in some extra swag in there as well that he's gotten from Razor. So
Yeah, IWinAgain, just really showing off the power of Red Rush and just how consistent this deck is. Being able to really get in your opponent's face and just play threat after threat after threat until you can't answer it anymore. Really well done. Kind of a clinic on the deck by IWinAgain.
living up to his username there by winning again.